Topic of this video is distance and midpoint formula. Coordinate plane is formed by intersection of two perpendicular lines, x-axis and y-axis, and positive x coordinates are on the right hand side, negative x coordinates on the left hand side. Positive y coordinates are on the upper y-axis, negative y coordinates are on the lower y-axis. There's quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. If you ever forget which one is the y-axis, think about when you have a question, you raise your hand and you say y. So the one that's standing like your hand when you raise your hand, that's called the y-axis. Every coordinate pair has an x coordinate and a y coordinate in it. I've had students be confused in the beginning, which one is x, which one is y. Think about alphabets. What comes first in alphabets? X comes first. So first coordinate is the x coordinate, first point is the x coordinate, the second number is the y coordinate in your ordered pair. Graphing points in the coordinate plane. So graphing -4, 4, we have to look for -4 on the x-axis first, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4, +4 on the y-axis. So that would be in quadrant 2. This point will be in quadrant 2. 0, -5, x is 0, y is -5. That's going to be on the y-axis, and that's not in any of the quadrants. And -2, -3, x is -2 and y is -3. That would be in quadrant 3. Midpoint formula. We can use the midpoint formula to find the midpoint of any line segment in a coordinate plane. On the number line, to find the midpoint, we can add the two coordinates and divide by 2. But if we have a coordinate plane, then we're looking for midpoint of A and B. A has the coordinates x1, y1, and B has the coordinates x2, y2. To find the midpoint, we can add the two x coordinates and divide by 2, and add the two y coordinates and divide by 2. Sometimes we can write the midpoint coordinates using x3, y3. Let's see some examples. Find the midpoint where E and F is your line segment. We're given the coordinates of E and F. The coordinates of E are 7 and 5. Coordinates of F are 2 and -4. If you're given a graph, it's probably easier to count, or sometimes it's not easier to count. Like in this case, it's going to be somewhere in the middle and it might be hard to estimate by looking at the graph. So we want to go ahead and use the midpoint formula. I'm going to label them as x1, y1, x2, y2. So to find the midpoint coordinates, we have to add the two x coordinates and divide by 2. 7 plus 2 divided by 2, and 5 plus -4 divided by 2. So midpoint coordinate becomes 9/2, and 5 minus 4 is 1/2. So these are the points. These are the coordinates of our midpoint, which is 4.5 and 0.5, and that's gonna be about here. So if we label it on the graph, this is about the point where we have our midpoint for this line segment. In the next example, we are given the midpoint of the line segment is -2 and 1, and we're given the other endpoint, and we're looking for the missing endpoint. So we're still going to use the midpoint formula here. The midpoint x3, midpoint coordinates are x3, y3. x3 is equal to x1 plus x2/2, and y3 is equal to y1 plus y2/2. So in this case, I'm going to say that I I'm going to call the other endpoint, D, and we don't know the coordinates of D, so I'm just going to call them. Coordinates of C are -5 and 7. I'm going to call them x1 and y1. x1, y1. For D, the coordinates are missing, x2, y2. x2 and y2, the coordinates are missing for D. All right, so let's go ahead and plug them into the midpoint formula. We already know x3, y3, which is my midpoint. So x3, y3 is given. x3 is -2, x1 is -5 plus x2 divided by 2. I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides with a 2, -4, -5 plus x2. Go ahead and add 5 to both sides. x2 equals 1. So we have the other endpoints x coordinate we just found. Now we're going to be finding the y coordinate for the other endpoint D. So y3 is the coordinate of the y coordinate of the midpoint, which is given to me. That's 1 equals y1. I already know it is 7 plus y2 divided by 2. Let's go ahead and multiply both sides with a 2. 2 equals 7 plus y2 and subtract 7 from both sides. -5 equals y2. So coordinates of other endpoint D are 1, -5. Let's go ahead and label it properly here. 1 and -5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, exactly here. These are the coordinates of other endpoint. Now we're going to talk about distance formula. The distance between point A with coordinates x1, y1 and point B with coordinates x2, y2 is given by D equals x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared and square root of the whole quantity. And where did this formula come from? This formula actually came from Pythagorean theorem. So we have point A and B. And the distance AC will be x2 minus x1, and the distance BC will be y2 minus y1, the distance between the two y coordinates. So to find the distance D, we can go ahead and use Pythagorean theorem, which is leg squared plus leg squared is equal to D squared. So D squared is equal to leg squared. Pythagorean theorem says hypotenuse squared is equal to leg squared plus leg squared. And to isolate the D, we would have to take square root on both sides, and that would give us our distance formula. x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, square root of the whole quantity. Let's see an example. What's the distance between the given points U and V, and we are given the coordinates of both. So for coordinate U, for point U, the coordinates are 7, 5. For V, 4, -3. Here we have x1, y1, x2, y2. To find the distance, we're going to go ahead and plug x2 as 4. Doesn't matter which point you call first coordinate, or whichever point you call the first point and whichever point you call the second point, makes no difference. I could call the V coordinates as x1, y1, U coordinates as x2, y2. The only thing I want to say, keep in mind, a common mistake I see if somebody does it wrong is, instead of calling the point coordinate as x1, y1, some people call it x1, x2, and y1, y2, and that's why it would be incorrect. So each coordinate point has an x coordinate, and a y coordinate. All right, so x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared, square root of it. Two negatives will become a positive. 4 plus 7 squared plus -8 squared. 11 squared plus -8 squared will actually become +8 squared. So it's 121 plus 64. Square root of 121 plus 64 turns out to be square root of 185. Square root of 185. And that's it. Approximately equal to 13.6. It was all about distance and midpoint formula.